I'm Tom Powell, an AG Leventis Foundation funded research fellow here at the university. My research is focusing mostly on the 40% of the land surface which is managed by humankind. So most of that is farming and forestry land. And in doing those activities, we have a huge impact on many global systems, both the climate system and nutrient and water cycles. And I've been focusing mostly on how we could change those relationships to have a more sustainable future in farming and forestry and on the earth in general.
I'm Anna Harper. I'm a research fellow at the University of Exeter. I'm interested in climate and vegetation, so how climate change affects vegetation, and also how vegetation can affect climate through the carbon cycle. Currently, vegetation takes up about 1/3 of the annual emissions that humans emit each year. So we're emitting about 10 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere each year. But through photosynthesis and growing plants, the land surface takes up about 3 billion tons of carbon each year. So the land surface is already contributing to climate mitigation, but we want to be able to enhance that climate service from the land surface. So this is important because forests store a lot of carbon, and if this is released into the atmosphere, then that will increase climate change. And so we want to be able to understand where carbon is stored on the land and to try to encourage carbon storage on land or increase it in the future.
The project that Anna and I worked on recently was looking at the implications of the Paris climate agreements, which had quite ambitious targets for limiting climate change to 2 degrees or even 1.5 above pre-industrial. We were really interested in how the land surface could help meet those targets, so what the potential for things like regrowing and recovering forests and growing bioenergy crops could be for removing carbon from the atmosphere.
And so to actually meet this, we need to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And there's a few ways that we could actually do this, even though it sounds a bit like science fiction. One way is using bioenergy crops. Historically, these are things like sugarcane or corn, but those aren't very good for the environment, so we can use tall grasses that grow really well in the tropics, but also grow well elsewhere. And these can be used to draw down carbon dioxide as the plants grow, and then we use them for bioenergy. And then you can do carbon capture and storage at the bioenergy plants to keep the emitted carbon from going into the atmosphere. And so when we combine bioenergy crops with the carbon capture and storage, you actually get a net removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So this is one way we can help meet the Paris Agreement. And another way is using forests. So if we regrow forests or avoid future deforestation, then this helps carbon stay on the ground, and that also could help mitigate climate change.
The Global Systems Institute community has really opened up the partners that we can engage with who are out there in the world doing fantastic things already. So I'm currently trying to put together a project working with a fantastic organisation, mostly in East Africa, who are helping networks of subsistence farmers to plant trees on their land, which both helps to rebuild their soils, which are heavily eroded, and also brings them income because they can sell carbon credits for regrowing the trees. They're dealing with very small areas of trees individually, but as a network they've planted millions of trees and are having a really powerful impact on the planet. So we're trying to put together a toolkit where we can really measure the really diverse impacts of all the things they're doing, so how it affects their income and their resilience to climate shocks, how it affects their food security, their local biodiversity, as well as their larger impacts on climate and water systems. That network is growing very effectively, and hopefully a toolkit would be useful to many similar projects all over the world as well, and to generate comparable data that could be shared by organisations to see what works and what doesn't.